What is the creepiest thing that has ever happened to you? When I was in my early 20s, I was fresh out of the closet and lived in the French Quarter. I started getting hang-up calls from someone, presumably a hookup. After a few months of sporadic calls, someone showed up outside of my window at around 2 AM and started blasting a tape recording of me saying, "Hello? Hello?" Then drove off. 10 years old. Men's locker room at the Y. An old dude touched my dick and smiled. It was over in 1 second and haunts me 42 years later. Edit. Who knew this would become my top rated comment of all time? So much thoughtful commentary and stranger danger touched my dick is the capper. A person was shot in the head 3 feet away from me in the spot I was standing not 5 seconds before in queue. I was skiing with a group of my friends, and I let a family take my spot in line because it would have fit the lift exactly at 10 people. We quickly swapped spots and I turned around to my friends, putting my back to the father who now stood in my spot. Then he just dropped. No loud bang or anything. Just a thud as the guy hit the snow with blood splattering all over my back. I see his face every day. Full stop. Full stop. We found out later that there was a group of people hunting where they shouldn't have been, and that it must have been a stray bullet. TL. DR. Someone attempted to kidnap my friend in front of me. I was about 8 and walking home from the school bus stop in a scattered group with various neighborhood kids and parents. I was walking with my mom, and my friend had fallen a few feet behind us. This beat to shitty brown car pulled up and stopped by my friend. I turned around just in time to see her shake her head no and run toward my mom and me. The driver was a former employee her parents had just fired. He saw her walking, pulled up, and yelled, "Get in." Full stop. He did all of this with multiple witnesses. I don't know what his long-term plan was, but at the least he wanted to frighten her parents for firing him. F-king creep. When my kid was about 5 years old, he was a champion sleeper. Put him to bed. He was out pretty quick and would sleep through the night until morning. One weeknight, he wakes up around 11 PM crying about his grandmother, his dad's mom, saying he wants to call her. I tell him we can't call her because she's sleeping. Just like he should be. It took a while and I had to let him stay in my bed, but I got him back to sleep by promising we would call her at 7 AM when we wake up for school. My alarm goes off at 7 AM. He immediately gets up and asks to call grandma. We do. Aunt answers the phone. Apparently, grandma was in a work-related accident at about 11 PM the night before, and had only just gotten home from the hospital about an hour before. So she was sleeping. Easily the creepiest moment of my life. My kid and his grandma have some seriously deep connection I'm unable to explain. TL. DR. My kid woke up in the middle of the night because he knew his grandma had been hurt on the other side of the city. Someone in my dorm regularly tries my doorknob as I'm sleeping. Probably some drunk kid who can't find his dorm room. When I was 13 I used to sneak out of my house and walk around the forest near home as a means of rebelling against my parents who thought our neighborhood was really dangerous, which it wasn't. I got to the edge of the forest at probably 1230-1 and I immediately noticed a really tall lanky man walking around the perimeter, but I know it would have been impossible for him to see me from where I was. Anyway, I watched him walk off till I couldn't see him anymore and made for the forest path, which is lit up by really dim orange overhead lights. Started walking and singing bubblegum in a dish when I saw the same dude from before like 30 feet away standing under the light. Total movie shitty. Couldn't see his face really or anything. We both just stood there for a second and he said in a super calm voice, "I never asked for much." I turned around and started to run and looked back and he was stepping into the trees. True story. Clichés and all. In a well-known casino in Vegas, I was heading to the parking garage at like 4 AM after a long night. Anyways, I head into the elevator to go to my floor, and there's a guy in the elevator with a hoodie and hat on. He stares me down. and I just get a weird feeling in my gut. He had the 5th floor already pushed. And I was parked on the 3rd floor, so I hit 3. The elevator then arrives at the 3rd floor. And I get off. Right then I hear him get off behind me, and at that moment I knew I was going to get robbed, so I just started sprinting. He ran after me for about 20 seconds before giving up. Luckily I didn't have that much money on me at the time. But it was still scary as FCK. Probably getting chased by 2 guys. My friend and I were walking home together from a party, and I was extremely under the influence while she was my sober mama. The main street we normally used was blocked due to an accident, so we walked down a random dark residential street. 2 guys walking in the opposite direction walked right past us. A few steps later I get the most intense gut feeling, and my friend and I at the same time turn to look at each other, and then behind us we see those 2 guys sprinting now in our direction. Never have I bolted that fast while being drunk in my entire life. We get to the end of the street and there were lights and a cop car. We looked and the guys had slowed and stopped. We also immediately ran into 2 old friends from high school. Guardian angels, man. Thank God. When I was 11, I was at the beach. I realized a sketchy guy was sort of following me around. Everywhere I went. He was about 20 feet away, just kind of glaring at me. He was probably in his mid-30s. Your average bearded creeper from the early 90s. I realized something was wrong when I got separated from the friend I was with and jumped into a little tide pool that had a rip effect going. The guy jumped in on the other end and I was getting dragged toward him. I can still remember the dude's slow, deliberate frog stroke as he got closer and closer. I had a huge surge of adrenaline and managed to claw my way out of the water. I took off running, screaming for my friend. It was a pretty busy day at the beach, and I imagine a grown man sprinting after a kid would have raised eyebrows. I stuck like glue to my parents until we left. That guy probably would have made furniture out of my skin. I had a sleep paralysis a few days ago. I had both visual and auditory hallucinations. I saw a shadow person sitting right on my chest and talking to me in a very inhuman low-pitched voice. I couldn't get a single word. Whole experience lasted about 20 seconds, but I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. I got robbed on the way to work. I was 4. My sister was 6. She takes me to our front porch and says, "I'll race you to the other side of the street. Ready, set, go." I ran. I heard tires lock up and look to my right and see a plume of white tire smoke. He stopped about 5 meters from me. I will never forget the look on the driver's face. I'm 39 now. I look back to the house and my sister is still in the same spot on the porch, smiling. Bitch. Needless to say, she is a sociopath and I haven't seen her in over 10 years. It wasn't me, but my dad was heading back to Lancaster, car where we lived, from Vegas. I was only a baby, so he was between the Antelope Valley and Victorville. He stopped to pee on the side of the road in the pitch black middle of nowhere. He said he started to hear whispering. Then suddenly an overwhelming wave of fear hit him. He isn't prone to fear, but he said he pissed on himself trying to get back in the car. That it is the most scared he has ever been. That as he started driving his heart was slamming in his chest. When he got home, my mom and grandmother were freaking out as it was now 5 AM. He left Vegas at 8 PM. It should have been a 3-ish hour drive since there was no traffic. So he lost hours of time and no idea what the FCK happened. Staying at a small lodge. About 10 rooms. We had the whole place rented to ourselves and there were maybe 15 of us there. No kids allowed. Woke up in the middle of the night because I heard kids running up and down the hall. Looked out there and nothing. Chalked it up to my imagination. Next morning got up and casually mentioned over breakfast and 3 other people had heard it too. Then a staff member overheard us talking and told us that the lodge was actually built where a house had formerly been built but had burned down many years ago. Like in the 40s or 50s. And there had been a little girl who had died. I've never gotten goosebumps so bad. All of us were creeped out. Just gave myself the chills writing this out. If I was a lodge staff member, I would make it a point every morning to say how the lodge was built over a burned down house. That was built over a graveyard. That was built over an Indian graveyard. And a suicide cult's death cave. Econo Lodge in South Carolina. People were knocking on our windows at night. Then on the other side of the walls. My mom built a barricade on the door and called the cops. Took them 25 damn minutes, and when they got there they said nobody was there. We left and went to a nice Holiday Inn. I was 10 and it was just awful. When I was a teen, I saw a faceless entity in my house one night who was trying to steal my face. Stayed home from work one day and was cooking around lunchtime. Heard a knock on the door and quietly checked the peephole. Didn't know the guy, so I just went back to cooking. I start hearing these weird noises at my door and can see the top of his back when I check the peephole again. I stroll over and grab my nightstand 40 calories. Walk back to the front door and just swing it open violently when he got it unlocked. With my pistol by my side, I calmly ask him, "Can I help you?" and he does a full backwards somersault down the stairs and ends up running off with a serious limp. I've seen him in the park twice prior to me moving a few months later. He would avoid eye contact and bolt. The second one was catching one of my homeless clients attempting to break into my truck. I still had to find him housing until he went to jail for DV. I was walking my dog late at night around a residential neighborhood. He started barking and growling at some bushes off to the side. I figured it was a stray cat. But a creepy guy came running out and headed off into the nearby woods. My dog started going crazy and wanted to hunt that creeper down. But I made a foe. Visited my folks' mausoleum to pay respects. Weekend. Clear weather. About 9-10 in the morning. It's an outdoor one. 2 stories. U-shaped. Built around a courtyard. Open side to the north. Parked about 50 yards away. Glanced up as I parked and observed a male. Dressed in a black suit. White shirt. I think black tie. Looked Hispanic. Clean shaven. Early to mid 30s. He walked toward a sink cutting station in the NW corner of the second floor. Where my parents' niches. Then pivoted and walked back south out of my line of sight because of the layout. Probably about 10 feet on the second level was visible from where I parked. I turned to pick up my flowers from the passenger's seat, then immediately exited the car. Walked the 50 yards and up the flight of stairs, and no one there. After paying respects, I confirmed the stairs were the only way down. Grappling hooks finally paid off for someone. One night while tucking my 2-year-old, now 4, to bed, I asked her what she wanted to be when she grew up. She told me that she used to be a grown-up. She said that when she used to be a grown-up, she was my grandmother. My grandmother passed away in 2007. She then proceeded to tell me a story about a kitchen mishap where my grandmother tripped and spilled boiling water when I was young and playing near her feet. Freaked me the FCK out. I've asked her several other times since and really haven't heard anything since. Very strange though, to say the least. I'm not religious and generally a skeptic. But I've heard enough of these stories to make me curious about souls being recycled. When I was 9, I slept over at my best friend's home one day. In the middle of the night I heard this faint tapping on the window. I saw a silhouette of a man with his hand on the window. Just looking through the curtain and tapping slowly. I woke my friend up. He saw it and we ran to his parents' room. Now, just last month, I was talking to my best friend and he brought up that happened. Turned out to be very frequent as it happened before in the past. One day, my best friend's dad hid behind the shed waiting for the same guy to tap the window again but never showed up. They moved out obviously. Went to the bar one night with a friend. On the way home, driving down a fairly busy road, I see a ton of people gathered on the side of the road. Down a hill. Beside a tree line. Struck me as rather odd but didn't think much of it. The next day, I go down the same road to take my friend home in the morning. And it's sectioned off and tons of police are there. Turns out someone had been murdered the previous night right near the woods. TL. Doctor drove past someone being murdered. I was staying at my grandparents' house in North Dakota and had to get up in the middle of the night to take a piss. I got out of bed. Stood there for a minute and looked back at the bed to see myself still sleeping. Urge to piss vanished and I sat back down on the edge of the bed. And don't remember anything after that until I woke up in the morning. I used to get asked who were you with? A lot when people would see me out walking. It didn't faze me at first as I just assumed they made a mistake, but then one day I asked who they seen me with. I was told by multiple people, who didn't know each other, that they saw me walking with a girl often, especially at night. One friend I was meeting early in the morning, around 3 AM, asked me who I was just with and told me a girl was walking beside me and then turned off and said she even appeared to say bye to me. What makes it creepier is I always used to hear someone, a girl woman, call my name in the house and my lights would turn on around 2 to 3 AM. I haven't experienced any of that in quite a few years though, so who knows. I work at an elementary school that used to be an orphanage. One time I was bending over a sink helping a very young child turn the faucet on and off. And, looking in the mirror, thought I saw a kid walk into the bathroom behind me. Turned around. Nobody there. During 7th grade a few people in my group of friends were altar boys. The priest, Father W, decided to have a meeting in his office with me and my 2 best friends to recruit us to join the group. He offered great reasons. Mainly that we got to hang out with him and skip class for 3 hours to go to church and get ready for it. He had this creepy enthusiastic look. Like someone with the munchies lusting after cake in the window. Of course we did not agree to join him. A few years later Father W was hauled away as a child molester. Even creepier, the people who did join the priest have really f'd up lives now. One is in jail for rape. Went to bed one night and woke up to fresh snow. Looked outside my bedroom window to see footprints walking up to my window. Standing. Then walking around the side of my house. Always feared something like this. Because you never know how many times they've done the same thing when there wasn't snow. My grandmother collected stamps all her life. When she died in 2008, I got her stamp jar. Being 13 at the time, I had no interest in a jar full of stamps. So I left it on my shelf in my closet. And it was forgotten. A month ago, I found it. Coated in a thick layer of dust and thought, this may be neat, so I cracked it open to look through it. Most of the stamps were uninteresting. A couple from exotic places. But one stood out. A 2015 stamp commemorating the Queen having achieved the longest reign in history. Despite the fact that she'd been dead for nearly 8 years. I have no idea how it got in there. Woke up one night with a 4-inch scar on my sternum. Not a cut. A scar. We were sitting in my grandmother's living room around a television that was turned off talking. I was a kid. But old enough to understand what was going on. She starts talking about her husband being on the television waving at her and smiling. But there was nothing there. A few moments later the phone rings and it was the hospital was calling to say he had passed. When my brother passed away, he had been in a coma for months. The hospital called then too and I knew it was about him. It was Christmas Day and we were coming into the house and I just froze. I don't know how. But I knew he was dead. My parents are pretty old. Every time either one of them calls I'm terrified to answer for a brief second. A non-paranormal one. I had hip surgery last year and when I first woke up from the surgery coming out of the operating room I couldn't figure out where I was or what was happening. I asked the doctor where am I and he said the hospital. You just got out of surgery. It still wouldn't come to me why I was having surgery and I asked if I had been in an accident. The doctor reminded me of the hip surgery and I remembered what was going on. Even though that's not all that weird. Those 10 or 15 seconds where I didn't know what was going on was incredibly unnerving.